Okay, guys, welcome back to another episode of Rotten Reviews. On this episode, I'm going to be taking a look at 2012's Total Recall. And right off the bat, we have an 82% tomato meter fresh rating and a 78% audience score. Um, oh, wait a second. Wait a second. Actually, no, we don't. We have a 31% tomato meter critics rating and a 47% audience score. Oh, what happened? Well, let me explain. The first Total Recall movie, 1990, was an enjoyable film. I saw it in the theater. Everybody I knew loved it. Everybody around me in the theater loved it. There was nothing but praise for it. In fact, I've probably seen it 5 or 6 times, maybe more. It replayed on cable and was sold well on VHS and DVD. It's considered one of the great movies, action movies of Arnold Schwarzenegger, Sharon Stone, and Michael Ironsides. Particularly, his performance is great as the villain. Then I don't know what happened, but Hollywood decided that they needed to remake it. They just couldn't leave it alone. They were fresh out of ideas. That happens a lot nowadays. So in 2012, they remade Total Recall. They cast, Colin Farrell in Arnold Schwarzenegger's role. They cast Jessica Biel. They cast Kate Beckinsale. Again, I think, contrary to what the rotten scores say, I think they actually cast it well. I think every actor, even in the supporting roles, was cast perfectly, but the script was crap. They basically took the story, the inciting premise of Total Recall from the original film, in that the main protagonist, he visits a company in which they promise to implant memories of a vacation in his mind so that he can actually have a utopian wish fulfillment vacation and then return to work without ever having traveled anywhere. And then from that point on, the second movie just derails into an entirely different type of sci-fi film. The world is totally different. The world building is completely weird and nonsensical. A large part of this new world in the remake of Total Recall involves in a post-apocalyptic world of some sort in which people live in two different areas on opposite sides of the planet. You're not shown whether these are the US and China, but you can kind of assume it's along those lines. And they have built a gigantic elevator to travel between these two human civilizations, and the rest of the world is some kind of radioactive wasteland that they can't travel through. So there's this gigantic space elevator, or gigantic elevator that goes through the center of the earth, which you get on board the elevator, the car takes you down, and then it crosses through the center of the earth where there's 0 G, and then it goes up the other side, like literally digging a hole to China. It's completely ridiculous. It has nothing to do with the original movie. It's almost like they took, just the inciting premise of the first movie, and then they had a script for some other weird sci-fi channel-like movie, and they just crammed that together and made one movie and called it a remake of Total Recall. What could go wrong? Everything went wrong. Let's get right into the audience reviews. The first one, September 10th, 2019. 2 stars, terrible remake of classic. I agree. Now, before we continue, I'll give you my star rating. I think it deserves 1 star. 1 star simply for having the budget and not, offending me with CGI in any way. And it gets nothing else. Period. End of discussion. Now, moving on. 2.5 stars. 2.5 out of 5. Competent enough, but is exactly the same as the original, but worse in every way. Yeah, it's exactly the same as the original, up to the point where he goes on vacation. But as far as the world building and everything else and everything that happens after that, complete fail, completely worst. It's worse than something you'd want to watch on the Sci-Fi Channel that had a shit budget. 2 stars, not a patch on the original. Arnie had something called screen presence. The so-called hero beats up and kills 20 armed, trained men dressed in body armor, barehanded, and a few minutes later he is running like a frightened rabbit away from a 50-kilogram woman. They do not have a clue how to make a good action movie nowadays. They cannot even get a remake right. Very disappointing movie with, as usual, too many tough 50-kilogram chicks and rubbish acting. I'll agree 100%. Yeah, the fight scenes are unrealistic. This guy, whether he's a secret agent or not, in the first movie, he defeats all these people with his bare hands, and he doesn't know how. But he's had all this crazy combat training. It's been suppressed in him. It works in the first film. In this film, it just comes across as completely unrealistic and boring. We've seen this before, only this is the same thing redone in a more unrealistic fashion. It has the crazy B-movie sci-fi and comic tropes where, Kate Beckinsale is flinging guys around. The problem with that is Kate Beckinsale is fine doing that as a vampire in Underworld, but how does she do that as an actual real woman in any time period? It's completely ridiculous. But that's not its only flaw. We'll find more. I do want to mention something notable that kind of offended me. They tried to put some weird politics in it. It might have gone by really fast for a lot of viewers, but it stuck me really good. In one scene, the protagonist opens a safe deposit box of sorts. Inside is money that his secret agent self has hidden, for his use, similar to what they set up in the first movie. When he pulls the cash out of the drawer, there's one denomination marked with Barack Obama bills, and the other denomination is marked with Senator Harry Reid bills. I don't know if they thought that was funny or they're just trying to make a political point, but they made a political point. It was a bad attempt at inserting left-wing politics in. Couldn't tell if it was humorous, but it stuck out so much it pulled me out of what little believable parts there were. So I found it completely ridiculous. 2.5 stars. It's a good movie, but not a good remake. Wrong. It's not even a good movie. The whole elevator through the center of the earth makes no sense. It's not explained why the rest of the world is uninhabitable or uncrossable. They certainly have the technology to transport themselves through the center of the earth. As crazy and wasteful energy-wise as that would be. So how come they can't just fly over radioactive parts, in some kind of aircraft? It doesn't make sense at all. 1 star. I want my 2 hours back to watch the original again. Comparisons aside, this movie is plain bad. I'll agree, and I agree with the 1 star. 2 stars. Is it good? Not really. Is it entertaining? Yes, if you like action films. What this was remade confuses me. Oh yeah, because they were starting to run out of original ideas. Not starting to run out. They've been bankrupt of originality for decades now, it would seem. It's just becoming more obvious. Now, as far as like action films, this is passable in any way? No, because the action sequences are completely unrealistic. Again, I'll say, you don't have guys just not getting a scratch and they're taking on whole teams of bad guys trained up to the gills with all this high-tech weaponry, but yet suddenly you're James Bond and you get your way out of it. And 50-kilogram or less girls, yeah, no. 2 stars, poor remake. Colin Farrell cannot act himself out of a paper bag. Yeah, in a lot of movies, that's the way he comes across. I don't think that's true. I think he's just good when he's cast in certain ways. He was cast properly for this. It's just that he didn't know what to do, or the director didn't know what to have him do. In this case, I'll put it more on the director than him in this movie. In other movies, though, it's him, no question about it. 1.5 stars, I don't like the movie. 1 star, acting was meh, and the lack of Mars made it off-putting. Don't like movies that piggyback on the success of originals to make a quick buck. Also, what was with Kate Beckinsale's random, out-of-place English accent? Why must there always be at least one in every movie now, especially by those who don't have one in real life? Yeah, exactly. Why does Kate Beckinsale have a British accent when in this movie it's set up that we're well into a century or two in the future in which the two places on Earth that are inhabited by humans, neither one of them is British. So, yeah, it doesn't make a lot of sense. 0.5 star, not very good. Stick to the original. What else do we have here? 2.5 stars, Spanish. One star. Incredibly dull and pointless remake of an Arnie classic. None of this cast stand up to the original. Special mention for Beckinsale, who is possible one of the worst actors I've ever seen. If you're anything like me, you'll just be shouting out loud the lines they've just read in a stereotypical Arnie voice. Doing this was 100% more enjoyable than watching this boring film. See you at the party, Richter. Get your ass to Mars, etc. Yeah, it's disappointing also that Mars wasn't even a factor in this movie. It was never mentioned. It had nothing to do with it. This was just a post-apocalyptic sci-fi channel type world with the same type of logic. Very disappointing. Um, 3.5 stars, nice movie. So where's the info? Full movie action, no terraformation machine, no explorer, hole in earth with passenger, going out nowhere else with this train in the first movie. Um, I don't know if they're saying good or bad, but they're saying it's good in their stars. I disagree. 2.5 stars. I liked the piano scene, but some movies don't need to be remade. Yeah, this didn't need to be remade, and this was a really, this actually completely embarrassed itself. 1 star. As an avid fan of the original movie, I am insulted by how this movie is trying too hard to be taken seriously. It is a remake of a movie where Arnold Schwarzenegger dresses up as a woman to get to Mars. It isn't supposed to be absolutely serious. Not only that, but even for a remake, it is unoriginal. I know that remakes are supposed to have the same plot of the original movie, or at least a similar one, but this movie is self-aware on how terrible it is. I know this because they rip off Minority Report and Blade Runner. Yeah, this movie feels like a ripoff of Minority Report and certainly a ripoff of Blade Runner, in the costume design, in the atmosphere or the attempt at an atmosphere. Yeah, it's a definite ripoff of the first Blade Runner. I got that right away. Um, the fact that they're attaching the Total Recall name to it, like I said, it seems like they had a script for a totally different movie and they just plugged Total Recall into the beginning of it. Um, it's completely, it's not even comedy like this reviewer says. They're not even attempting to, poke fun of themselves. I'm not sure if that would have worked. I don't think it would have, but they didn't try it. They tried to play this 100% serious action movie. Complete fail. 3.5 stars, completely unnecessary, but not a completely terrible retelling of the classic original, but without the cheesy graphic gloriousness that only Paul Verhoeven can bring. No, it wasn't that they didn't have the cheesy humor. It was not that they didn't have Arnold Schwarzenegger. It was that the movie, even by itself, if this wasn't a remake, is complete garbage. It makes no sense. You have two different things that are incongruent with each other. You have one, okay, the premise that this is a movie about implanting fake memories in somebody and that person, that awakens. You find out in the plot twist that this person is actually a sleeper agent, a special agent of sorts. That's one thing. Then you're shoehorning this together with some kind of sci-fi movie where people are traveling in an elevator through the center of the earth. These things don't even belong together in the same movie. That's what's so damn pointless about it. 0.5 star, pointless remake. Don't waste your time. Either read the book or watch the original. I wasn't aware it was a book. That's unnecessary. The original movie stands alone fine. 0.5 star, horrible. Should have left it at the original. If they were going to remake it, could have at least somewhat resembled the first one. Exactly. It didn't even resemble it. Other than they recreated the machine, the memory implantation machine. They did a faithful job recreating that, but again, the rest just derailed into something else. 0.5 star. I wish I could wipe this rubbish from my memory. Absolute dishwater. Embarrassing. For me, having sat through it and not gone for a walk. Yeah, I feel for you there. If you had watched this in the movie theater thinking you were going to get something along the lines of the original, ooh, you would have been mad. Yeah, just walk out. Again, it's hard to walk out when you paid your money, but wow, it's worthy of walking out if you are misled like that. 4 stars, a more stylish, sleeker remake, but still a remake. No, you can't even call this a remake. Yeah, they remade the scene where Doug's memories were implanted and it was discovered he was a spy. That's the only part of the remake. Everything else is a completely different B-movie, sci-fi channel thing. Wow. 4.5 stars, awesome, but no Johnny Cab or equivalent. My main complaint, really, Your main complaint is that there's no Johnny Cab. Okay, okay, that's a legitimate complaint, but that's the least of this movie's problems. Oh yeah, and no funny black guy lying about how many kids he has to feed, but can understand since some might see that as poking fun or being racist. Characters were also not as likable, although it was hilarious when Jessica Biel said, "Oh, now I'm gonna kill that bee," while laughing angrily or whatever she said. Uh, Yeah, I don't even remember Jessica Biel's performance. I'm not saying it was good or bad because I just don't remember it. It must have been nothing special. 1 star, not nearly as good as the original. One might think that with the advancements in digital enhancements and special effects that at least this aspect would have been better, but not the case. The plot does not make the viewer think as much or as deeply, and maybe it's just me, but the synthetic cops remind me too much of Star Wars. Did they get a discount on used costumes from the Star Wars franchise? Yeah, the synthetic cops like robot or android cops. It also doesn't fit with the world building because they're saying that the radiation zones, most of the world is a radiation zone, it's uninhabitable. Why couldn't they send these robot android type you know entities that were so prevalent in this film out to clean up those areas or rebuild them? Again, it's what I like to call incongruent plot or world building, but that's the least of this movie's problems. 1 star, not nearly as good as the original Total Recall with Arnold Schwarzenegger. Yeah, okay, I read that one, sorry. 3 stars, or 2.5 stars. After watching the original one, I must say the plot is the same, but tries to be a little more serious. You can watch it as a defect or something good. What? The plot isn't even. As soon as he goes to the Total Recall company, there's nothing the same after that. 4 stars, great action movie, very different from the last one. Tries for realism over fun. Realism over fun? What part of a giant elevator going through the earth is realistic or feasible? Or even if it was feasible, what's the point? Even there's no aspect of it that works. Even if you explained that some magical technology made that feasible, the scale of it, what's the purpose of it, why is it even there, what's its function in this society, it makes no sense. 0.5 star, take the original movie, remove every part that made it vaguely interesting, fun, or colorful, and then add blandness. You've made Total Recall. Um, no, you're skipping something. Actually, add a lot of weird shit that doesn't belong on top of it. Um, 3.5 stars. It's a good movie, but like its predecessor, is very violent. To its credit, it doesn't have the same irritating gore scenes as the original. It also doesn't completely follow the plot twists. You'll need to see how things work out. There are no plot twists, especially in a remake where you've seen the first one. The attempt at a plot twist is no different than the first one. There are no plot twists that I can tell. 4 stars. It is much better than people give it credit for. The action sequences are fantastic. The acting is great. Farrell, Beal, and Beckinsale in particular, no. And the story is a truer adaptation of the short story than the original film. I love the original, but I enjoy this film just as much. Okay, so they're claiming here that there's a short story that preceded the movies, and this is more true to it. Well, that's irrelevant because this is not known for the short story. This is known for the original Arnold Schwarzenegger movie, so irrelevant. Short story, irrelevant. Graphic novel, irrelevant. 4 stars, full of action, suspense, and mystery. This sci-fi remake had me hooked. Hooked on what? At least if they had had Kate Beckinsale in really tight leather, fox leather outfits. Okay, maybe, but they didn't really do that either. 3.5 stars. I have no idea on why this movie's rating is below 70%. I'm not the kind of guy who likes nonstop PG-3 action movies, but this one is one of my favorites. Visual effects are nice, the atmosphere is immersive, and I confess that I was a little overwhelmed and bored by the nonstop action sometimes. But when the plot twists switch on, things start to get much more interesting. Colin Farrell is convincing and does all the action scenes pretty well. Direction is good too. Wow, it's like you're watching a different movie. Or you've only seen Sci-Fi Channel B movies, and this one had a great budget compared to that. So yeah, it would have blown you away, I guess, if you had never seen anything else. 1.5 stars. You will not believe it, but this is the second film with Clive Owen I've ever seen in my life, and the first adaptation of a Philip K. Dick novel I ever saw. Unfortunately, I cannot say much about the movie because, okay, I don't even know what movie they're talking about, so I'm moving on. 3 stars. Nothing like the original. Enjoyable but predictable. No, not enjoyable. 3.5 stars. Horrible Total Recall remake. Then why did you give it 3.5 stars? I don't get it. Or as I like to call this, a reimagining. But a good action film as a whole, just take out the term total recall. Yeah, take out the term total recall because this was actually, it had to be the script for something else before they decided to make it into total recall. It had to be. But again, it still would have ended up on Sci-Fi Channel no matter what. There wasn't anything there that was interesting. 3 stars. Good action, offers more updated sci-fi fare, but doesn't part from the original too much and thus seems pointless. Well, part from the original, I do know, okay, there was one other thing that they had to put in here. They had to, even if I were doing this, I would have to. The other thing that stands out from the first Total Recall is the three-breasted woman. They, of course, had to put her in here. This is mandatory. Okay. That doesn't make or break the film, though. They should have actually did a little bit more with that, but they don't. They just put it in there as a reference to the first one. Again, that's mandatory. Doesn't make this go up or down, though. It's just as an aside. 1.5 star, 1.5 stars. I love the original film, so I was disappointed when I saw they were not only remaking the film, but they were also removing practically everything that made the original great. Yes, the special effects mostly look decent, and yes, the cast is good, but the cast isn't used to their fullest thanks to a bland plot and boring script. Agree. I think they were all cast in the proper roles. It's just that the script sucked. All the violence, grit, and practical effects that were present in the original have been completely washed out, which makes the action for the most part come across numb and boring. I agree. I agree 100%. The first one was non-stop practical effects. I don't even know if there's anything we can call CG by today's standards. And it worked. It had a corniness, a comicness, a goofiness, and it worked perfectly with Schwarzenegger. This one, yeah, it's just CGI, takes itself dead serious, and it's just washed out and unmemorable. Yeah, I agree 100%. 1 star. The star is only for KB. Kate Beckinsale, again, okay, so maybe if they had put her in an underworld costume, it would have gone up to 3 stars. Could be. 2 stars. Well, that was stupid. Yet another terrible remake. Sleek looking but thin, confusing and forgettable. Actually started out halfway decent but got dumber as the movie went into the second half and just became complete action nonsense. The original might have been cheesy in a way, but it was at least fun, unlike this unneeded retread. Exactly. The first one was fun. It was fun all the way through. This one had like zero fun. 2 stars, a flat, heartless, action-packed sci-fi movie that has nothing of the original classic. I agree. 2.5 stars, about as good as the original. No, only if you're like a fan of dramatic westerns. Then yeah, both the original and this one are crap to you. Okay. 4 stars, great art direction. No, I don't think so. It looked like it just copied aesthetics from the first Blade Runner movie, and it didn't deliver anything special on that, but it was a ripoff of that. 2 stars, a lifeless and witless version of the entertaining original. Agree. 2 stars, let's hope the original movie isn't bad as this movie. Well, this is a December 2016 review. Well, if you haven't seen the original, forget this one. Just scrub it from your mind, like use a machine of some type like they do in the movie to just suck this from your memory and watch the original. You'll enjoy it, guaranteed. You might even think it's silly by today's standards, but you'll enjoy it a lot more than this one. 2 stars, cool action sequences don't make up for the boring and dull plot. Not even cool action sequences. Boring action sequences. 2 stars, I wanted to like this movie more than I did. The original is better. Some of the special effects are really impressive looking, but the plot and some overacting or miscasting or something just didn't work for me. It didn't work because it was like a sci-fi channel movie plot crammed into something, and you put the Total Recall label on the box. 3.5 stars. Another remake that didn't need to be remade, although in the pro column it's not as day-glow post-80s as the previous incarnation, and apart from its white-dominated principles, the original had one up on this with the Hispanic lead to Coden. It has a more multicultural air to it. The visual design is also gritty cyberpunk, although perhaps a little too much lens flare going on, and its sound design is grounded in this too and more appealing. Beckinsale also owns every action scene she is in. Wow, you're giving this too much credit. You're also reading too much identity politics into it. Um, just like the original, it wasn't making any political statement. Yes, there was a Mars Earth political thing going on in the movie, but if you think it was making some identical identity politics statement with the casting in 1990, no, it wasn't. Half a star. Whoever that critic from the front cover from MySpace that said it's better than the original needs his credentials taken away. Graphics and some of the effects are new, but nothing outstanding and definitely not close to Arnold's. Yeah, whoever that critic was, they probably got access to special stuff or they got paid in some way. Because, yeah, there's no critic. I don't even understand how this has a 60 something on Rotten Tomatoes. But that's, this isn't my thing to bag on the critics so much. I think only audience reviews matter on any film. So let's move on. 4 stars. Love this movie. Loads with action and violent sequences. Very entertaining. Kate Beckinsale is so hot and sexy in this film. Okay, again, just watch Underworld. One of those. She's very successful in those. They all have rotten scores, audience, and, well, no, they all have rotten scores critic-wise, but everybody continues to pay money to see Underworld films. They make profit. A lot of it is Kate Beckinsale is still sexy. But let's move on. 3 stars. The screenplay is quite absurd, but a good one, sci-fi for me. Bryan Cranston as a villain, strange enough. Again, I think Bryan Cranston, he works in this too. He's cast in the right way. It's just the script is crap. 2.5 stars. When it comes to remakes, I think this holds its own as the original is super outdated now. I like Farrell in the main role, and it was a watchable film. It didn't hold me all the way through, though. You think the first one is super outdated? Well, I guess you just like CG over practical effects. I would say no. As time goes by, you're becoming outnumbered. People would prefer practical effects if they feel more real. So we'll see. But this thing has 47% audience score. I think it deserves like a 20% audience score, just for insulting fans of the original in particular. It's a bad movie on its own. It's a bad movie even rerunning on Sci-Fi Channel or anywhere else. And so I've had my say. I feel like I got something off my chest, but maybe not enough because I can't actually reach in and punch this film in the face or anything. But I've gotten what I can get out of me, right? So anyway, I'm going to leave this one for now, and I will see you again on another episode of Rotten Reviews.